So in today's session, we'll deal with some topics, some images specifically related to instruments in operative dentistry. Okay. I hope you guys are all ready and I hope it is streaming fine. I'm not getting any comments. Okay. Okay, everything is good? Yeah. This is beach shirt because, you know, the protocol, right? So today is weekend, so you're supposed to go to a beach. So anyways, I hope everything is fine. Right. So let's start with the presentation now. So as I said, in our 24th quick revision class, we'll deal with some images from operative dentistry, in specific instruments from operative dentistry. So we'll start with the first questions. Identify the parts of this particular hand instrument. So you can see a hand instrument and we can see various parts A, B, and C. So double-ended instrument. So what does each part represent? Identify A, B, and C. Yeah, so as you know, we have various parts of a hand instrument. So you can see clear cut, this is a double-ended instrument. So double-ended instrument illustrating three basic components of the instrument, so which include blade, shank, and handle. So A represents blade, B is the shank or the junction, the connecting portion between the blade and the handle. C represents the handle. So this you are very much familiar with. If at all there is a question asking you identify the parts of an hand instrument, there shall be no errors in answering the same. Okay, very good. Yes, blade, shank, and handle. Now, identify various numbers which are represented here. As you can see, also there is an instrument formula 1085 814. We'll get back to that later. You can see again a hand instrument, long axis of hand instrument, and then you can see various illustrative representations 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there seems to be some angles, widths, lengths. So what does these numbers, or do these numbers represent? Instrument formulae as such is very, very important. In fact, we posted a list of various instrument formulae of various hand instruments in our E-classes conservative section. You can refer that for more information regarding the instrument formulae in specific. So identify 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, right. So let me review some information regarding the same. You know, we have 4-digit formulae and 3-digit formulae. So as you can see, this instrument has a 4-digit formula. The formula is given right at the bottom of the illustration, 10, 85, 8, 14. So what does each of the following numbers represent? So cutting instruments have formulas describing the dimensions and angles of working end. These are placed on handle using a code of 3 or 4-digit formulae separated by dashes or spaces. In this case, you can see they are separated by dashes at the bottom of the illustration. So the first number indicates the width of the blade in 1/10 of millimeter, as you all are aware of. The first number indicates the width of the blade of primary cutting edge in tenths of millimeter. The second number of a 4-digit code indicates primary cutting edge angle. If primary cutting edge angle is absent, then we only have 3-digit formula. And then the third number indicates the blade length in millimeters, not in 1/10, in millimeters as such. And then the 4th digit indicates the blade angle. So in this given formula, 10, 85, 8, and 14, now you know what each of these particular digits or numbers represent. Width of the blade in 1/10 of millimeter, primary cutting edge angle, and then length of the blade in millimeters, and then blade angle, right? Very good. So you should not get confused. If it is a 3-digit formula, then the primary cutting edge angle is omitted, right? Very good. So if the edge, take for example, straight chisel, right, 12/7/14, if the edge or the primary cutting edge is perpendicular to the if the edge is perpendicular to the blade, then we omit this particular primary cutting edge angle, as it is obvious. So if the edge is locally perpendicular to the blade, this number is normally omitted, resulting in a 3-number code, just as we discussed now. The best example which I can give you is Chisel, 10, 12, 7, 14, 10, 7, 14. The values might vary depending upon the manufacturer, right? Okay, very good. So having clarity in these basic concepts is very, very important. That is parts of a hand instrument and various instrument formulae and what does each number represent. Now, identify the working portion. So what does these arrows represent? So we're talking about a primary cutting edge, secondary cutting edge, and on, right? So which of the following is primary cutting edge and which of the following is or represents secondary cutting edge? So you can see 3 arrows over here, the left arrow, top arrow, and bottom arrow. So what does each of these arrows represent? So this instrument is Chisel, Carpenter's tool, which I'm sure all of you have seen the same and have used it during your undergraduation. So it's a chisel. So as we discussed, the cutting edge is perpendicular to the blade. So we omit this cutting edge angle in such cases. So it has only 3-unit or 3-digit formula. So which of the following represents primary cutting edge and which of the following represents secondary cutting edge? So as you can see, primary cutting edge towards the end or towards the extreme left arrow. So that represents primary cutting edge, and bottom and top arrows represent secondary cutting edge. So in the process of, you might have done various cavities in plaster mold. So you might have used both primary as well as secondary cutting edges. And you know why it is called primary and why the other is called secondary? Because of its relevance in function, isn't it? Isn't that obvious? Good. Now, you can see an instrument formula or whatever it is. You can see various numbers 2, 8, 28, 10, 95, 7, 14. So in fact, we discussed the same in the previous slide. So what does each number represent? So what does 10 indicate? What does 95 indicate? What does 7 and 14 indicate? And identify this instrument based on the given instrument formula. And also what is that number 28? So I've asked you so many questions in a single slide. So I'm sure you will be able to answer all of them, right? Very good. Yeah, left arrow, the previous one was primary cutting edge, top and bottom arrows. The sides are the secondary cutting edge. And also some of you are telling that it's a mesial or distal GMT. Are you sure it's mesial GMT? Okay, very good. So first of all, it's a GMT. So GMT, we have left and right sides, and also we have mesial and distal sides. So it's a GMT. So is it mesial or distal? I mean, upon observation, you can obviously differentiate both, which we'll deal with in the next slide. But if numbers are given, and if you're asked to identify whether it's mesial or distal, so what is this GMT? Mesial or distal? I'm asking you this question again. Is it mesial or distal? Yeah, primary cutting edge angle seems to be 95. So is it mesial or distal? So when the second number in the instrument formula, as you can see, is 90 to 100, mark my words, 90 to 100, the instrument is used on distal gingival preparation wall, 90 to 100. If the second number is 75 to 85, as already discussed in our classes, it's used on mesial, right? The 75 to 85, the pair is used to remove unsupported enamel on mesial gingival wall of preparation. 75 to 85, it's mesial. Mesial will be less comparatively. Distal, it is 90 to 100, as given in Sturtevant's. No confusion whatsoever. Make a note of the same. And what is that 28? So you rightly identified that this is a GMT. Whether it is left or right, observe the image and then we can identify the same. So you know what 10 represents, width of the blade in 1/10 of millimeter, 95 primary cutting edge angle, 7 length of the blade in millimeters, 14 is blade angle. So since it is 95, 90 to 100 is distal, 75 to 85 is mesial. So all questions are answered. What does this 28 represent? So can anyone say what this 28 represents and does it have any significance? In some instances, an additional number on handle is the manufacturer's identification number These identification numbers are included to assist specific manufacturers in cataloging and should not be confused with formula numbers. Not so significant for us, so just keep in mind that these additional numbers which are there, they represent manufacturer's identification number, right? I hope it's clear. So any confusion whatsoever, let me know. Now, again, we have a particular instrument. So identify what this instrument is and what is the difference between the left illustration and right illustration. No, 28 or 28 is not the tooth number, okay? It's a manufacturer's identification number. Good, Udvi. Yeah, 90 to 100 distal GMT, 75 to 85 is mesial. Okay, so you can see an instrument here and you can see, yeah, you tell me whether it is same instrument or different instrument, and you guys tell me whether you can identify and differentiate the same. Good, very good. Okay, okay, excellent. So remember, this is a GMT. So whether it is mesial or distal, so that's something which is a challenge for most of us. So it's very simple. If you have those instruments and if you have prepared a mesial and distal class 2, then by adapting the instrument, you can easily identify whether it is mesial or distal, left or right. Okay. So these are, we're not concerned about left or right, that you can easily identify depending upon the curvature once you hold the instrument along the long axis. Right? So left instrument, right instrument. That's very simple. But mesial or distal GMT, observe the cutting portions, the cutting edges. If the cutting edge, as you can see in the left illustration, if the cutting edge is away from the long axis, you can see it is away, it's pointing upwards or away from the long axis, remember that's a distal GMT. However, on the right illustration, you can, I'm not saying it's right instrument, I'm talking about right side of the screen. On the right illustration, you can see the cutting edge towards the long axis. If that's the case, that is mesial GMT, right? A very simple rule to remember, whether it is mesial or distal. I mean, just by observing images. If you have them with you live, then you can adapt them and then you can identify them. That's even very easy. That's how we practice during a post-graduation. But by observing these images, if you have to identify whether it is mesial or distal, observe the working portion, the cutting tip. If it is away from long axis, as you can see in the left illustration, then it is distal. You know, away from midline is distal, towards midline is mesial, right? You know that rule. So the left illustration represents distal GMT. The right illustration represents mesial GMT. I know you often land in confusion, but write down this simple rule. You will never ever make a mistake in identifying these GMTs. Okay? I hope it's clear. Very good, very good. Sonali, yeah. A is distal, B is mesial. Yeah, you can say that in terms of acute angle as Swati has mentioned. Okay. I mean, if you have those numbers, yes, acute angle, mesial, as we have seen, 75 to 85, obtuse angle. So in whatever way you remember, it's completely your choice. Yeah, cutting edge away from the operator in the sense when you hold the instrument in this particular fashion. So if you talk it in terms of the long axis of the instrument, yes, cutting edge away from the operator or from the long axis of instrument, distal. Excellent. So you can have your own ways of remembering and identifying. Well done. Now identify these instruments. I've placed so many cross sections. I mean, not the cross sections. I'm sorry. So many illustrations. So in fact, we were discussing about some cross sections previously. I got confused. You can see so many illustrations. Identify as many instruments as you can. First, we'll start with left, and then we'll go with top right, and then bottom right. So all of these are excavators, chisels, hatchets. So what do you think? Which category do you think these instruments fall under? Okay, the top right is the one which you are very familiar with. You might have used it. You might have had that instrument in your kit during your second year BDS. So we'll start with that. Top right, as you can see, that instrument is enamel hatchet. So all of these, yeah, as you all rightly mentioned, all of these fall under chisels. and the top right is enamel hatchet. You can identify the same very easily. It's a double-ended instrument. I'm sure you're aware of the same. So enamel hatchet is a chisel similar in design to ordinary hatchet, except that the blade is larger, heavier, and beveled only on one side. So this you're very clear. It has its cutting edges in a plane that is parallel with the axis of the handle. Consider this very, very important. And it's used for cutting enamel and comes as right or left types for use on opposite sides of preparation. So in this particular screen, top right illustration represents enamel hatchet. And then we'll move on to the left illustration. So these are chisels. So what chisels are they? Weddell-Stack chisel and pine-angle chisel, right? So the same are represented in bottom right illustration as well. So chisels are intended primarily for cutting enamel and may be grouped as straight, slightly curved, or bin angle. So if you observe the bottom right illustration, A represents straight chisel, B represents slightly curved Weddell-Stack chisel, and C represents bin angle chisel, as simple as that. So B and C are represented as the complete forms in the left illustration. So chisels are intended primarily for cutting enamel and may be grouped as straight, as you can see in A, slightly curved, that is Weddell-Stack chisel, that is B, and then bin angle, that is C. And then also along with this, we have enamel hatchets, as we have seen just now, and GMTs. So these are various groups of chisels. Consider this very, very important. The straight chisel has a straight shank and blade with bevel only on one side. Its primary cutting edge is perpendicular to axis of handle, so we are omitting primary edge angle, cutting edge angle. It is similar in design to Carpenter's wood chisel. The shank and blade of chisel also may be slightly curved. That is, you can see in the illustration B, which is called as Weddell-Stack design, Weddell-Stack chisel, or maybe bin angle, that is illustration C. The force used with chisels is essentially a straight thrust or a pushing motion. I want you to underline this point. A right or left type is not needed in straight chisel because a 180-degree turn of instrument allows for its use on either side of the preparation. That's the reason why you don't have a left straight chisel and right straight chisel. So we can expect an assertion and reason from this type of phrase or statement. The bin angle and Weddell-Stack chisels have the primary cutting edges in a plane perpendicular to axis of handle and may either have distal bevel or mesial bevels in case of B and C illustrations. So very simple. Left illustrations, you can see two images. The left one is Weddell-Stack and the right one is bin angle. And when you move on to the right part of the screen, the top one is enamel hatchet. In the bottom one, you have enamel hatchet, Weddell-Stack, and then bin angle, right? So some specifications and details regarding these instruments. Very good. So slightly curved chisel is Weddell-Stack, bin angle, right? So I'm sure you have more clarity now. So now let's move on to the cross-sectional design of a burr. So we can expect several questions on the same. In fact, we had several questions previously as well. So you know various parts and all. So identify the one which you can see in a red question mark. I've tried to highlight that in a question mark, red question mark. So what does that particular arrow represent? So very good. You can see that seems to be an angle between the rake face and the axis of the burr, which is by definition rake angle. Very good. So is it positive or negative rake angle? So that's another related question I'm going to ask you now. So since you said it is rake angle, excellent. So what does this illustration represent? A positive rake angle or negative rake angle? So you can see, I'll give you some hint. You can see the bulk of the blade, right? So that's the hint I'm going to give you. Okay, let me review some information. So this is a schematic cross-sectional illustration of burr blade design, which is viewed from shank end of head to show rake angle. Also, you can see edge angle and clearance angles. So each blade has two sides. Consider this very, very important. I mean, when you look into the burr, each blade has two sides. That is the rake face and the clearance face. And it has three important angles: rake angle, edge angle, and clearance angles. So two faces and three angles. Let me repeat. Each blade has two sides, that is rake face towards the direction of cutting and the clearance face, and then three angles: rake angle, edge angle, and clearance angles. Two faces and three angles. You can easily remember if you observe this illustration. The rake angle is the most important design characteristic of a burr blade. For cutting hard, brittle materials, we need bulk of blade, so a negative rake angle. A negative rake angle minimizes fractures of cutting edges, increasing the burr life or the shelf life. A rake angle is said to be negative when the rake face is ahead of the radius from the cutting edge to axis of the burr. So this represents negative rake angle, where it is said to be negative when the rake face is ahead of the axis of the burr. If it is lagging behind the axis of the burr, then it is more sharper, increased cutting efficiency, however, shorter life of the burr. Just the opposite to what we discussed for negative rake angle, right? We even have an elaborate video on the same in our rake classes. You can refer that for more information. So this represents negative rake angle, okay? So the rake face is ahead of the axis of the burr. Consider this a very, very important. Rake face ahead of the radius or axis of the burr. Okay, so that's negative. If it is ulta, then it is positive. Okay, right. So don't get demotivated even if you got it wrong, because at least now you learned and you'll never repeat the same mistake. So you have nothing to worry about as long as you're learning. Now, among these, identify which grasps they represent. I mean, it's very easy because in one hand you can see the person holding pen. In the other hand, you can see person holding an eroder. So identify the grasps. I'm sure it's very easy and it's very obvious. Yeah, of course, it's a pen grasp. Which type of pen grasp? Because we have conventional pen grasp, modified pen grasp, right? Inverted pen grasp. So which pen grasp are we dealing with here? So pen grasps, we have conventional pen grasps and modified pen grasps. So first of all, grasp permits greater control of the instrument. That's the reason why we consider it very, very important. I'm really sorry. Yeah, that's the reason why we consider this very, very important, because we enable ourselves to hold the instruments more efficiently with better dexterity and control. So grasp that permits greatest control of the instrument while maintaining ergonomic positioning of wrist and elbow is modified pen grasp. That's the reason why we deal with that in detail, not just in conservative, operative, but also in periodontics. So in case of modified pen grasp, as you can see, the middle finger is near the top side of the instrument, allowing a better control. So we're talking about tripod effect, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So as you can see, the left illustration represents conventional pen grasp. That's the reason why you see a person holding pen. And the right one is modified pen grasp. The correct position of middle finger, consider this very, very important, is near the top side of the instrument for good control and cutting pressure, right? So just like how you hold your eroders. So I'm sure you're very much aware of the same. Okay. So left one is conventional, right one is modified pen grasp. And then you have palm and thumb grasp, modified palm and thumb grasp and all. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Now, finally, so these are all cutting instruments, diamond instruments, abrasives. Identify the same based on their head shape. So you have different head shapes, 1 to 14. So name as many as you can. See, the first one is round. So name as many as you can. Then it's a challenge, but if at all there's a question asking you to identify the shape of the abrasive point or a diamond instrument, you should be able to, right? So identify as many as you can. The characteristic shapes and designs of a range of diamond cutting instruments. These are different from burrs, right? So burrs are different. They have blades, whereas diamond instruments, they have abrasive particles. So the dynamics completely change when we use burrs and when we use diamond instruments. Fourth one is straight, so very good. Excellent. So anything else apart from 1 and 4? Okay, second one is flame. 10th one, tapered fissure. So 10 and 11 seem to be the same, right? Okay. I'll give you some time. Try answering as many as you can. Good. Very good. 13 is wheel. Okay. Then what about 14? 10 and 11 seem to be the same. 13 and 14 seem to be the same. Okay. Okay. Fantastic. So the first one is round burr. You can make a note of. First one is round. The second one is football. Okay. Those who said, oh, well, okay, we can accept the same, but as per Sturtevant, it is football. Diamond cutting instrument. Number 2 is football. And number 3, we discussed the same while in yesterday's session while dealing with taste buds, barrel shape, if you remember. So the third one appears to be in the shape of a barrel, so barrel shaped or barrel. Fourth one, it's a cylinder, but the end is flat, so flat end cylinder. Fourth one is flat end cylinder. And fifth one is also a cylinder. However, the tip seems to be beveled. The working tip seems to be beveled. So it is beveled end cylinder. Cylinder with beveled end. And then sixth one, inverted cone. So I'm sure you might have used it a number of times. Seventh one, flat end taper. Flat end taper. It's a tapered instrument, but the end is flat, so flat end taper. Eighth one is also taper, but it's not flat, so it is round end taper. So ninth one, I think some of you answered it accurately, a flame shaped, ninth one. 10th one is needle. 10th and 11th seem to be the same, but 11th one is even tinier, even though it's not so clear in this, but when you compare 10 and 11, 11 seems to be even tinier. I mean, with minimal diameter comparatively. So 11th one is interproximal. 10th one is needle. 11th one is interproximal. 12th one, if you have the habit of eating pears, you'll definitely identify the same. So 12th one is pear shaped. 13th one and 14th one seem to be the same, but 14th one is wheel. 13th one is donut. So I'm not sure how many of you eat donuts, but okay. So it doesn't mean that there is an empty space in between, but depending upon the size, we have named it accordingly. 13th one is donut, 14th one is wheel. Okay, very good. So the first one is round, second one is football, third one is barrel shaped, fourth one is cylinder, fifth one is beveled end. So fourth one is flat end, fifth one is beveled end cylinder, sixth one is inverted cone, seventh one is it's a taper with flat end. Eighth one is it's a taper with rounded end. Ninth one is flame shaped. 10th one is needle. 11th one is interproximal. 12th one pear shaped. 13th one and 14th one donut and wheel respectively. Yeah, very good. Well done. So before I conclude, so I'm sure you have idea of all the instruments which we discussed. So the parts of a hand instrument, various instrument formula and what does each digit or number represent, and then primary cutting edge, secondary cutting edge, the instrument formula, if at all they ask you to identify the instrument based on the formula as in this picture, right? It's a clinical image, so it's a real image, not just a artistic or clip art kind of illustration. You should be able to identify the instrument. And then left and right GMTs, I'm sure you will do. So mesial and distal GMTs, you should be able to identify. The left one represents a distal GMT, the right one mesial GMT, right? So you know how to identify that. So you have various types of chisels. So Weddellstat, bin angle, strike chisel. So 3 instruments which we discussed in detail. And the bar blade design, very, very important topic. So the one in question mark is rake angle, angle between rake face and axis of bar. And this is a negative rake angle, more bulk of the cutting end. So greater life of the instrument, of the blade as such. And then conventional pin grasp, modified pin grasp, palm and thumb grasp, modified palm and thumb, inverted pin grasp, you should be able to identify. And various shapes. These are not burrs, these are diamond points. You should know the difference because these diamond points, these have abrasives all over. So these are usually used in crown cutting, if you remember. Whereas for cavity preparation, we use butts. So there is a difference between the same. Butts will have blades, whereas these diamond points have appraisals all over. So cutting happens throughout the surface. I know you. I'm sure you know the distinction. Okay. So before I conclude, no matter what challenges we face, I mean, it's very obvious that we feel ups and downs in our journey. It can be anything, not just preparation. But the most important thing is, at least we should smile by the end of the day. I mean, without smile, without happiness, without joy, then there is no point in this life. So we're blessed to have this life. We're blessed to be living now in this modern era of science and technology. So no matter what the challenges are, no matter how many smartphones, how many costly gadgets we have, what ultimately matters is not just the smile in our Instagram post, but smile on our real life, right? So keep smiling. Few more days. So you have, as long as you focus on the task at hand, you have literally nothing to worry about. Just focus on what you have to do now. Try to use maximum, try to make maximum use of the available time and keep giving your best each and every moment. Usually during these circumstances, thinking about the result, thinking about the output will create a havoc. It brings more pain, it brings more suffering. Please don't poke yourself and just focus on giving your best. It doesn't matter how you prepared for the past few months or years. It doesn't matter how you're going to give the exam. It doesn't matter now. What actually matters now is what you're going to do now. So what are you going to do now? Just focus on giving your best. I hope you got my point, right? And most importantly, with courage in heart and smile on face, enjoy each and every moment. Enjoy each and every moment, because that's what life is worth for. And if we are suffering, the moment is wasted, and we're never going to get that moment again, once again. So let me conclude with this, and I hope the session was helpful. We'll try to discuss more topics in the coming days. So by Sunday or Monday, I'll conclude all the sessions, and it's better not to have any discussions 1 or 2 days before the exam. What do you think? And also, I see most of you worrying about the mock demo test, which was conducted in NBE website. First of all, they are the same questions which they are posting for the past 2 years. 2019 was the same, 20, I think it was the same, 21, it's again the same questions. So we prepared a key and explanations, but you literally have nothing to worry about, because these questions are not exclusively designed for dental graduates and postgraduate exam. It's very unfortunate, as I mentioned in the comments, that at least they should have some courtesy and take some time to create questions which are relevant to our profession, mostly relevant to our profession. Just focusing on medical subjects, I don't know what good does it do in our clinical practice. We should understand basics, we should understand systemic manifestations, but going in depth, it only creates more suffering and agony, because our orientation in our undergraduation is completely different. At least they should have some courtesy and extend the same for dental graduates, and for that matter, other specialties as well. I don't know how it is for others. All right. So, anyways, you have nothing to worry about. Let me take my word. These are not exclusively for dental. These are for everyone. The questions are same for everyone. Okay. So don't panic upon looking at these questions. But anyways, we worked on them. Our team worked on those questions. They helped me in creating key and explanations. You can refer that in your test series. It's live. The test is live today in your test series accounts. And for YouTube aspirants, we'll try to upload those questions, key and explanations in the form of a video as soon as possible. Okay. But take home message, please don't worry, because there is no point in worrying. Worrying only will derail you from your preparation, isn't it? So easy said than done. Okay, let it be easy said than done. But if you follow it, who is going to benefit? The real challenge lies in following the same. And I'm sure you'll take it up as a challenge and focus on the task at hand and give your best. Love you all. Good night. I can be chief of NB, just a joke. I mean, why do you want a joke? I'm chief of PTPD Academy. What more do you think I want? I'm chief of PTPD Academy. That suffice. By the way, this is not a joke. Okay, this is not a joke. Okay, Ankur. Yeah, you're welcome, guys. You're welcome. And also, I've been getting several queries and requests from mails. I will definitely address all of them as soon as possible. And also, those who haven't taken up our practice test, you can just drop a mail. We'll give you details and you can proceed accordingly. Right? Okay, okay, guys. Good night. Take care. Keep smiling. Give your best.